Welcome, everyone. I want to introduce Liam today. He's our guest. He's a senior emergency analyst for the government of British Columbia. He's supporting the FIFA World Cup 2026 in Vancouver. He's working with partners from Vancouver, Seattle, and Toronto to help analyze emergency risks for the world's largest sporting event. Um, I was talking to Liam and the other folks this week. I've done events, nothing the size of this. It kind of makes, to me, the Super Bowl look like child's play. Or I think what the FIFA president said, it's a Super Bowl for like 30 days in a row. Um, so it's a big, big undertaking. There's so much to learn from people going through it, from their past events and lessons shared. Hey, Jeremy. Um, but I want to kick it over to you, Liam. Fill in any blanks on your background, how you got into this role maybe, and what drew you to it, and we can jump into your slides.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you, Drew. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. 11 a.m. here on the West Coast, but good afternoon to all those out east and in between. Liam Devine with the government of British Columbia. Um, I was contacted by Drew a couple months back and was asked if I'd like to share some experiences for some of the work up to date for preparing for the World Cup, coming to my city, beautiful Vancouver on the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, so very happy to share some material with you today. I have about 16, 20 slides. It should only take about 20 minutes, and then happy to really open this up and take some questions and have more of a lively discussion. To fill out the rest of the meeting, and perhaps give you back some of your precious time. So, in terms of this role in emergency management, I coming out of graduate school in Ottawa. I was out east in the nation's capital. Did a master's in conflict studies from Ottawa U. I jumped right into the humanitarian sector with the Canadian Red Cross, our version of the American Red Cross, and was pretty much head first into emergency management from that perspective, with everything Canada and British Columbia in particular faces in terms of natural hazards, your wildfires, which are fairly annual now. Some of them are have set records in terms of the last 5 years since I've stepped into this sort of area. Flooding, which is pretty common in the spring and fall. It causes a lot of people to evacuate their home, and then a few other hazards in between that have deployed across the country for, including the COVID-19 pandemic, when similar to your country, we were in a state of crisis, and our healthcare system and hospitals and long-term care homes were facing a huge strain. So after my time in the NGO world, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I transitioned into provincial government, which is our version of your state government, and also within an emergency management unit, working for a children and family program. I then transitioned into an environmental emergency program that specialized in oil spills and uh, chemical spills, those kind of hazards. Working with U.S. counterparts as well on the U.S. Pacific states, for the oil spill task force, which is a big collective of provinces and U.S. states to attend to any future ExxonMobil type events. And then just this past year, uh, the lead agency for emergency management in BC was hiring for this position for the World Cup. And Drew and I were speaking just right before this, but I'm a lifelong football fan and have some of the blood in me on my dad's side, who's from Glasgow, and grew up a big Celtic fan. And so it was a natural linkage for me. It seemed like a convening of emergency management with football and a unique opportunity, and so I jumped at it. But yeah, that's essentially how I got in this role. So it's a 2-year project. We are just about halfway through, and so what I'll do now is share my slides and take you through that process up to this
Liam, for
point.
the emergency managers of us who also have football as a passion, that Venn diagram, you have
Yeah.
the coolest symbol I think we can.
Thank you. I consider myself to be very lucky to have sort of landed in it. Yeah, and just the you were chatting about the Super Bowl and stuff, but just the fact that there seems to be this convergence between emergency management and event safety, which I think is growing. There's a lot more, I think, scholarship that's coming out in terms of how those two fields need to progress together and really professionalize this major event space. It's something we're trying to do in BC and really use FIFA as an anchor and as a catalyst to do that. Because there's going to be more events, obviously, to come in the future that all our cities will be hosting. Okay, so here we go. I will kick us off. You got that okay, Drew?
Looking good.
Perfect. So this is my beautiful city on the right. This is the downtown core. On the left is BC Place, where the games will be taking place. It's our largest stadium in BC. It holds about 65,000 fans. Wanted to begin today with a land acknowledgement, which is something that we do in all across Canada, really, to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples that were here and are still here, that we work and live on. I'm calling in today from the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations in Greater Vancouver. And we highly value their perspectives and teachings to help us plan for these kind of events. So, where are we? Just wanted to begin with a bit of a positional assignment just to perhaps remind some of the East Coasters or anyone else that BC is on the far upper left spot, sorry, west coast of Canada. Gigantic landmass. We border Washington State, Idaho, a very small sliver of Idaho, and of course, Alaska. And we very much cherish our relationship with the United States. I'd like to thank all of you for paying an extra 25% to be here today. And it's yeah, what can I say? We love Americans. So
And one of the most beautiful spots in all North America, in my opinion.
thank you, Drew. Much appreciated. Yeah, so it is the World Cup is the most watched competition on earth. I don't know if it's 30 Super Bowls, but it might be 20 according to this charts. It's in terms of viewership, it's the creme de la creme every 4 years. FIFA as an organizing body is absolutely gigantic in terms of its scope and influence. And as you can see from this chart, it's all of these events combined: F1, Tour de France, rugby, Super Bowl, Champions League final, which is massive, and the Olympics. It surpasses all those combined in terms of viewership every 4 years, and so it is something to take hold of, and we're trying to respect the attention it gets, but not let it intimidate us in terms of threats and potential risk. So for this World Cup, it's super unique. This is the first World Cup where 3 countries are hosting altogether, and 16 cities. As you can see on this map, we are pocketed up there with really closely with Seattle, which we're meeting with frequently to take lessons from. And then our only other city in Canada that's hosting games is Toronto, which will have 5 Mexico with 3, and the US makes up everything else. So super exciting. The numbers there is how many games each team's playing, and yeah, it's going to be quite the spectacle in terms of just the organization overall. This is just a bigger shot in terms of the schedule and when everything starts. The first game is on June 11th of next year. I believe the very last game is on July 17th. So it's about 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks. And yeah, as you can see, it's a busy schedule. There's matches going to be taking place all over the place. In terms of which teams are playing where, we won't know that until next December when the group draw happens. So we still got a little ways to go. And of course, which teams end up coming to which city, including Vancouver, has major implications for risk and risk management in terms of fan profile.
Hmm.
So Vancouver is going to host 7 matches of the 104. There are 54,000 spectators at BC Place that it can hold. We're expecting just below 1 million people over 6 weeks to come into our city and the wider region. Just for perspective, the last World Cup in Qatar, which is just a single country, I believe they had 4 host cities and they had 1.8 million visitors. There's other considerations beyond BC Place itself for us to keep in mind, and that is the fan festival that each city will have. These are really big things in terms of economic boosters for each city and a place where fans gather. Will host 15,000 fans. There's transportation things we're taking into account with the U.S.-Canada border. We have 2 or 3 prominent border crossings with Washington State, and then as I mentioned, in close contacts in terms of things that are happening in both Seattle and Toronto. Any questions so far? Should I pause at all, Drew?
I think it's a really helpful overlay. Where did you get about the projection about 900,000 visitors over 6 weeks? How do you guys kind of come up with that?
Yeah, that's so it's not 100% confirmed. That was an initial projection from the city, and I want to say it's probably from 2024, where how they account for some of these things. It's based on previous World Cup events, and then also taking into account the fact that this is such a bigger World Cup than previous ones. For instance, instead of 32 teams, there's 48 now. So there's more fans from other countries, and then also one thing that's really going to influence the projections is which actual teams come, because for instance, like the English fans travel en masse, and I want to say perhaps up to 100,000 English fans will travel to whatever city they're playing in for their games. So
That's outrageous.
yeah, yeah, they're passionate.
And then there's 7 matches, Canada national teams there. Do you know how many how many countries, then different countries will be there? You don't know which ones, but do you know how many?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know which the group games that are happening. Canada will have 2 for sure. We don't know how, for instance, if Team X or Team Y is going to play a certain amount of times here. Technically, like generally how the World Cup works is the teams slot into groups, and then they'll have a round robin, which they'll play each other once, I think it is, and then they'll go to a round of 32.
Mm,
And Vancouver's also, so they'll go from 48 to 32 after the points are scored. Vancouver's getting a game of 32, and then they'll drop it to 16, which is like the quarterfinals, and then the semifinals and finals.
cool.
Yeah. So just on this next slide here, I actually have a video to show you. You can just give me a thumbs up when this starts. Awesome.
Dude, you guys
Okay.
have a heck of a comms team between the video and the live. I'm gassed up. I'm getting my flight up to BC.
uh, and yeah, it's pretty special. So that was actually put together from FIFA itself.
Okay.
Yeah, and they've done one for each city. So folks can go on YouTube and just type in your city or the closest one to you, and they customized it to each city's culture and geography, which is really cool. Um, so yeah, just thought I would share that a little piece of my home and the image of the World Cup on the beach there was is about 3 blocks from where I am right now. So
That's amazing. Steve, you got a question?
Yeah, hey Liam, thanks for being here. Quick question on the video production. When they came to town to do that, do they work or how did they work with the mayor's office or special events office to do all of that and ensure, no secret sauce was given away or there was just agreement and what would be shown and whatnot?
yeah, that's a great question, Steve. So there are other pretty big operation in terms of the other components outside of what I do for emergency management that are taking place within the World Cup planning. And part of that includes the marketing, the uh, brand recognition, tourism, all these different components, including production of videos like this that the city of Vancouver works with FIFA on. And so they would have probably, I would assume, brought in their production team. FIFA did to each of these cities, and then worked with the local video designers or marketing team to show which shots that they thought might be most appealing. But really, it, it's really outside of the work that I do. Just sort of lucky to be able to be part of a team that does that.
Thank you.
Of course, perfect. Okay, so now I'll start jumping into the actual what you folks all came here for outside of what the event is, the emergency management part of it and the risk management. Um, so in terms of the provincial side of things, these are the key players that are involved from BC. So we have the First Nations communities that I mentioned at the top. Then the city of Vancouver is the lead agency and the most the most involved in terms of a staffing perspective. BC Pavilion Corporation is we call it a crown corporation in Canada. It's like it's partly owned by the government and then it's partly privatized. And they own the actual stadium of BC Place, and so we're working. Vancouver's working very closely with them. Myself representing the province, and then there's quite a few of those other adjacent priorities and teams that are working on other aspects of FIFA, including tourists, uh, the marketing, branding, all those kind of elements, the economic benefit. And then we have the Integrated Safety and Security Unit, which we are a member of at Emergency Management. And this includes the local stakeholders, police, health, really everyone that needs to be at the table for security and safety planning. And then, of course, the airport is a pivotal place, both because it's the first place that the athletes land and the tourists for the most part, um, and also because of its security implications.
And Liam, for a reminder for folks, you're sitting at the province of BC. That's where
Correct.
you're.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. So I'm in this. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm with the province, and then we are a member on the security and safety unit. And in terms of what we're providing to the city, so our real bread and butter, as most emergency managers are, is communication and coordination support between the province and its partners. So we have a wide range of partners we work with, including local authorities, First Nations, NGOs. So we try to leverage those partnerships. The city itself is the overall lead for the event, and they engage us as appropriate. We are the leading agency in the province for emergency management. So as I mentioned, we have seasonal hazards all the time. We have regular hazards that we respond to and help manage. Um, and really, it's about us providing that all hazard expertise and coming to the table with some of the background and knowledge and systems knowledge for connecting the dots and getting the right people to the right place, providing that higher level strategic planning. So, in starting out for the tournament, we have 3 core goals. One is for a safe event and execution of that event. So we want the World Cup to be super safe and enjoyable for everyone that gets to experience it with very little disruptions. Uh, we would we want the government guarantees fulfilled that FIFA as an organizing body signs with each host city and the province. And then thirdly, we really want to use this tournament in a way to as a way to enhance our planning processes overall, and not just to treat it as a one-off that comes and goes as past events have, or sometimes even as natural hazards. You have a wildfire season or a bad flooding event, and sometimes it's hard to recalibrate and take lessons learned into the next season. So we're really trying to enhance operational planning as the planning is taking effect, so that post FIFA we have some legacy. And then the bottom row, it's just in terms of some of the more tangible things we're bringing to the table. We've done a needs assessment for emergency planning. We're updating major planned event guidelines, which I'll share with you shortly here in terms of how that's unfolding. And then just some basic recommendations for improving emergency management, communication, coordination throughout the Vancouver region. This slide here is just to give you a sense of the local versus uh, provincial and regional in terms of the event, what we're concerned about. So, Vancouver Emergency Management Agency, really well established emergency management program for the city. They also have experience from the 2010 Olympics that they're taking into this World Cup, which is super valuable. But they're much more focused on the ground, the operational elements, the venues themselves, both the stadium and the Fan Fest, including other licensed FIFA fan festivals, which will be taking place and pose a potential risk. They're heavily involved on planning on the police side of things and the medical. They have an EOC that's up and running, and they're the direct conduit to FIFA Canada for planning and for the tournament. And then on our side of things with emergency management, climate readiness, we sort of handle the multi-agency coordination. We can bring quite a few partners together for coordination calls and non-response calls. We provide guidance on mass gathering protocols. We do some planning around mass evacuation planning. Vancouver is also situated in one of the most high-risk earthquake areas in North America, and so a lot of thought has been put into mass care and evacuation planning, and evacuations that exceed local capacity. We work with the federal government at Public Safety Canada to really help bolster the planning process, and potentially also for requests that are outside of the city's ability to handle. And then we also provide support around joint information, public alerting, common operating pictures. We have some GIS techs that work within the province that help the city with their COPs, and just that cross-border element, as I mentioned. This slide here, I won't go into too much detail. Just wanted to give you a snapshot of how the different partners that we work with, where we cross over, and then where we're looking to enhance that alignment. Um, so within our own ministry, there's work within our own um, department. Effectively, there's work for us to enhance processes and systems, and really fine tune things throughout the planning. And then across government, because there's multiple departments, there's room for us to work with partners on areas of mutual benefit. Federally, I was mentioning to Drew just before, we do liaise uh, once in a while with FEMA Area 10, which I believe covers the Washington State and Pacific Northwest area. We do have some cross government forums around emergency management that we attend along with Public Safety Canada and FEMA. And then locally is really where a lot of our energy is spent with local authorities, regional districts, which are just larger incorporated areas in Canada, and our cross state partners. So to be able to validate and ensure and test that our plans are actually effective or reasonably effective and how we can improve them, we need to be able to exercise. So um, these first three in the top row are exercises that the city of Vancouver is undertaking. So the first tabletop exercise was last December and really went over and validated C4-2I functions, which stands for coordination, communication, command and control, and then 2I being intelligence and information. And really just trying to get that whole spider web diagram built out in terms of where everyone sits, roles and responsibilities. The second tabletop is taking place next fall, and it's a 2-day one. It's much more prescriptive, much more scenario based, informed from a risk assessment from a few different hazards that we're planning for. And then a full scale exercise, which is a big undertaking, as folks on here would know, is taking place right before the tournament, about 3 months before next winter.
Liam,
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
said Vancouver has led and is leading those efforts, the city,
Correct. Yeah.
and you guys have a kind of the lead, or at least a heavy hand in the evacuation part of that full scale.
In terms of the objectives of the exercise.
Yeah, is evacuation. I thought I saw on your last slide that that kind of falls in with your agency's wheelhouse of really helping in on the
It does.
evacuation.
Yeah, exactly. So we're really concerned about the movement of people, regardless of what the hazard is or the disruption. If people have to leave their homes, that's sort of when we get involved, um, and and um, and working with the cities to support their own citizens. And so that's the lens that we bring into these exercises. Is we're not so much focused on, as the province, we're not focused really on evacuating the stadium or evacuating a fan fest, because there's the stadium and the facilities have their own emergency protocols. The police have their own protocols for those incidents. Really, ours, what we're most concerned about is the hotel accommodations in the city are going to be near zero, or we assume they're going to be near zero. There's some validating to do there still. So when we even get a normal emergency, like an apartment fire or multiple house fires, where are we going to be putting evacuees during the tournament? And really also at the same time planning for that worst case scenario of, if there is a larger emergency, if there's a wildfire that erupts on the North Shore. Vancouver's surrounded by tons of topography. There is a lot of wildfire risk in Vancouver, even though we get milder, more humid winters, which help saturate the ground. There's a lot of trees that haven't burnt in a long time. And so if there is a large wildfire evacuation, what is our plan? So that's really the lens we're taking into those, Drew.
That's cool. And the software looks like a really cool one too. It says you're testing some event management software. And imagine you're doing some risk communication on that. Do you know at this point what other software y'all want to exercise
Yeah,
that might involve?
I believe it's being called event emergency event software. That there's some consultants that have brought it in and are helping really steward the process. It's very early days on that side of things. The city itself has their own information management systems. So in terms of when the EOC is activated and how information is shared and saved, and how a request or resource requests or expenditure authorization forms are processed. So those are all standardized. And in terms of the software for the NGEX and the measle and those kind of things, that's still in development.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One more question from you, from Rick, one of our attendees. He's saying he saw in the Olympics in South Korea, they required all athletes to ride within a 3-day period to test the capacity of the public transport system there. Has it been considered for mass evacuation planning in the case of an earthquake triggered tsunami or other emergency? Any effects on how that evacuation, does that come into effect on your evacuation planning or exercise?
The transportation element.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Public
Definitely.
transport element.
Yeah, definitely. Like we've so one of those other government partners I was mentioning is we have a transportation department. Vancouver itself has multiple transportation agencies. One that takes care of the trains, another one that looks after sort of like the bus network and the movement of people. They each of those have their own, I guess you would call it, transportation operations center. And so that's that side of things is pretty dialed in. But to the point of the question, in terms of contingency planning around the movement of perhaps thousands of people in a given time span, the capacity of those networks and the ability to successfully and safely move people is it's really the purpose of these exercises and the need to spend 2 years planning for these kind of events. And so those in terms of those plans they're not finalized, they're not concrete, but that's the work that still remains.
Yeah, that makes sense. A
Yeah.
lot of contingency plans within each one of those.
100%. Yeah, I mean, even when they were conducting the risk assessment in terms of hazards to plan for, there's an endless amount, but really trying to nail down what is perhaps the highest probability and like a moderate to high impact for things to plan for, because you can't pick everything. There's a lot of crossover. There's also planning going on the cyber side for cybersecurity, FIFA ticketing systems, all those sort of things need to be considered. So, all right, I'll jump to the next slide here. I think I'm close to the end, folks. So these are the guidelines I was mentioning that are being updated. I myself and a few other colleagues across government are updating major planned events guidelines. We have an original copy from 2014, and so we figured it's a perfect time to use the event to really get a document out there that's practical, useful for event organizers and emergency managers, and can really advise and direct people when they are thinking of hosting an event or applying to host an event, how to make sure that it's safe, that it's secure, that they've considered different hazards and risks, and that in the event that there are hazards and risks, which inevitably there will be, how to mitigate those. So that is the current document that's being sort of written at this time. if folks are interested in either receiving a copy or perhaps even reviewing one of the drafts, feel free to send me an email. Especially if you work in this event management space, or even if you're also planning for a World Cup, I'd love to get your thoughts on um, planning in general, but also this particular project. And yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Cool. That's awesome. Um, I have lots of questions we can go through. So if you can hang on for 20 more minutes,
100%.
uh, we can chop it up again. Cool. Um, it's really cool that you got to come into position that's, primarily focused on this specific event, and really hats off to, the province of BC for being forward thinking and dedicating something like that. Was there any point when you started at this and you kind of saw the horizon ahead of you and were overwhelmed at all? What was kind of when you first got your feet in there? How did you get situated? How did you make sense of things? Who did you reach out to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I I think to a certain extent, um, the ambiguity of what football at this scale actually is helps us a little bit, just in
Mhm.
terms of not so much being totally naive to an event on this scale, but I mean, certainly, um, we understand what it means, the World Cup, and we understand what it means for the city in terms of, and every city for economic benefit, especially in the context of coming out of the COVID pandemic and the amount of damage that did to local economies. So there is a lot of pressure, I would say, to make sure that we get this right, um, that it's an incredible event, that it's safely delivered, that people feel safe, and that information is communicated in a clear and concise way. So definitely the pressure exists there. I think the fact one place I'd give a lot of kudos to, and I would recommend for everyone is if you have something of this size, and I believe like Los Angeles is hosting the Super Bowl, the Olympics, and the World Cup in the next like 3 of the next 4 years or something. So they might be they're probably the gold standard to look to in terms of how they manage these things. But um, and that's not even considering the wildfire recovery. But yeah, it's just a matter of relying on your partners and your network, and really what you do is you take the same sort of planning and process, but it needs to adapt and it needs to be flexible, and that's not always something in EM that we have access to, is that flexibility. Like there's a lot of rigidity and there's a lot of like ICS, for example. Not saying that there's anything wrong with ICS, but just like needing uh needing some creativity, like bringing creativity to the table is something that really helps. And so surrounding yourself with people that think outside the box, and I'm super fortunate to have that on my team and with the city of Vancouver, really passionate, brilliant people, definitely has helped lower that anxiety, I would say, or pressure.
Interesting. Has we have a lot of public health people on here, and doing past events with that, sometimes they take some moves as anything from preparing messaging, right, in case there's a disease outbreak and you need to contact people who are traveling internationally, that messaging, to all the way to pre-staging Cipro and Doxy near the stadium in case something needs to be distributed in the next 72 hours after a bio event.
Mhm.
Is public health been at your table, and what's their role kind of looked like?
They have, yeah. We have exceptional public health representatives that are part of that integrated safety and security unit. They're a big part of it. Um, they really how the work is being organized is through different working groups, as you would imagine. Like there's big issues. For instance, CBRNE or um, communication and information sharing. And so what they've done is split off different topics into different working groups, and then representatives from each agency or the best ones for that specific topic come in and fill that need. In terms of health, there's lots of considerations going on for mass casualty planning,
Mhm.
both on the victim identification side of things, but also on like the family assistance centers, which I know the Americans actually specialize in quite heavily, and FEMA, I'm sure, has more than enough experience in. But we're kind of taking some lessons from those models after horrible, tragic events, and trying to prepare to see how we can support um, not only evacuees but people that experience forms of tragedy, whether that's
Mm.
from terrorism or that's from um, a natural event. And then just for health on the CBRNE side of things, there is work underway to ensure that we're meeting the standards and capacity that we need. That being said, Canada is very resource lacks in some of these resources, I should say, in terms of personnel and equipment and training. And so a lot of the times, and even in the past Olympics, I know we look to our U.S. counterparts to help with that, whether that's through mutual aid or an MOU. And so we're trying to build up some capacity to be able to get to a place where we can respond to those incidents, and that we're in a good place before the tournament.
Yeah, it's a heck of an effort. Um,
Big time.
do you have like if you could go back and talk to Liam 9 months ago to starting this, has there been any lessons learned already that you'd go, "Yeah, I'd emphasize this more," or think of this, or cast a wider net? Has there been any lessons learned in the planning process already?
That's a great question. I love that one. Um, I would say, um, I might have to think of that for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, as you
Uh,
knew the logic. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, just I don't know if I would if I went back to myself 9 months ago, I might just kind of reassure myself because I think I was perhaps a little unsure about what I was getting into and all the part.
Mhm.
It was pretty intimidating for me coming in because some of these folks I meet with are like big time players in policing or intelligence or
Yeah,
emergency management, and they're career professionals. And I'm sort of not in the beginning of my career, but 10 years in, and yeah, I think I would just tell myself to dive in, like just dive right into it, and which I think I've tried to do. There's some things where I think you can get ahead of yourself um, for something like this. Like the clock is always ticking to June 2026, and
yeah,
so there's days that feel monotonous and the same because you're sort of talking about the same things to like 1 degree difference of certainty. Um, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. But I'm like, I guess I'm like a trained planner, and so that's just how I sort of operate. And I try to improve just 1% each week, and hope that by the end of it, it all adds up.
that's not a bad, like, life lesson learned right there. That goes beyond
Thanks, man.
evaluations.
I wish I had a better answer for you.
That's good. That is such that confidence thing, I think especially, like, after you do something once, you kinda got a footprint in your mind you can
Yeah,
operate off, you got a little more confidence, but you've done other things, right? An event is complex, it's layered, it's different, but you've coordinated other complex things in your life, right? And so
100%.
much of it's transferable, and, like, that confidence at the beginning, totally understand that. Steve-O, what you got?
Hey, thanks for hitting me again. Uh, so Liam, one, I guess our greatest equivalent up till now is, like you mentioned earlier, Super Bowl, right? Um, and while it doesn't meet the numbers that FIFA does, it still, NFL, they're steering the ship for a lot of this event planning and have a lot of influence um, over local officials, stakeholders. I just kind of wonder how much heavier is that 500-pound gorilla when it's someone like FIFA versus what we might be accustomed to with NFL. How have they engaged, or did they engage you in the past? And just exactly,
What's that interaction been like?
yeah,
I,
are they
I
do
hear
they
what you're saying.
strong arm a lot, or yeah,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. In terms of the gorilla and the pound for pound pressure of each,
yes,
I I think they are similar, and I don't like the Super Bowl's massive. So to us, like this, like Super Bowl is the biggest thing of the year in most of North America. Um, so planning for that to me would be very similar in terms of the boxes you check and the people you talk to. And I think where the difference for this comes from is sort of those intangible effects that are hard to measure, like the amount of people that might be coming. I don't know if you guys in the US have like a pretty good idea of how many people travel for the Super Bowl each year. Um, but we're going off estimations that are inexact. And another huge piece is just the whole cultural reverence for football in general, and the fact that it's a global thing. Um,
how about FIFA as an
is
organization? Are they easy to work with? Not so much. Somewhere in between.
I to me an organizing. I haven't had, I can't speak to it really. I haven't had any direct experience working with FIFA. The city itself is the one who speaks with them.
Got it.
And up to this point, I think they've been pretty great to work with and dialed in.
Good.
Um, yeah,
Liam, and a different front, something from my experience. This event's going on. A lot of the partners have other things going on during this time, right? For like you and I, it's our top priority to get this bad boy planned and dialed in. And it has a part of their brain space, but not all of it. How have you kind of kept folks engaged without overwhelming them? Whether it's layered communications, text to these groups, in person, email updates once a month, rhythm. How do you keep folks engaged without overwhelming them?
yeah, that's a great question, Drew. So it's a delicate balance. And I think because we're still a little ways out, sometimes less is more in terms of what you share. Because inevitably, I know in my head that in 6 months, the dial is going to be turned up, and
Mhm.
the expectation for communication is going to be higher. So right now, there's, I would say, like the right amount of information sharing is happening, and it's important to be cognizant that you don't want to overload that. Like you don't want to need to start up monthly meetings if there's if you don't need to duplicate efforts that are already being made. So I'm trying to walk a bit of a tightrope with the partners that I engage internally, and then externally, it's pretty much a weekly occurrence for those working groups I was mentioning in terms of some of the more operational type planning. And there's a ton of milestones from here until even next December that the city needs to check off. Things like volunteer recruitment, um, the group draw, as I mentioned, training sites, like making sure the training sites are ready to go. The pitch at BC Place needs to be changed from turf to grass. So like there's tons of stuff between now and even next December that the city is undertaking. And Yeah, so there's the engagement is there. I think it's a delicate balance in terms of us as emergency managers or emergency practitioners kind of always want to be like in the loop or in the know. And sometimes I've had to remind myself just to take a step back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally get that. And you're right, like 6 months, it will naturally become front of mind for
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to
Um,
trying to get my sleep while I can.
last kind of point I'll leave to you, Liam. Is there any other like tips, anything you want to leave folks with who are doing a massive event, whether it's World Cup or not, right? Upcoming, anything that's worth passing along that from your experience so far?
Honestly, I would say continue reaching out like to folks that have done it before. That's been a huge plus for me. I've had some fantastic conversations with people that were involved in the Olympics, as I mentioned, both within my department and working for the city, and even across networks. Like, um, this is such a great platform, such an awesome opportunity, Drew, to be able to come and speak to people I never would have had the opportunity to, and people that work in similar fields or adjacent fields or medical fields. I think the more opportunity we can to share ideas, stay connected. At the end of the day, we kind of all have the same objective. It's, about keeping people safe, about staying organized, about keeping executive happy, those kind of things.
Mhm.
And so the more that those lessons can be shared and replicated to future events, I think it's going to be huge. As I mentioned, like the Los Angeles planning that's probably needing to take place for the next 3 years. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's going to top everything. So I would be really interested to stay dialed into that and just try to learn from some of our U.S. partners.
Um, Liam, super appreciate you carving out some time. I'm a huge person of like lessons learned, and like you just mentioned, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Um, it's happening in other places. Let's share it. And one little nugget can go a long way. So super appreciate your generosity sharing that.